Build with purpose. If you don't think through more than just the execution, it's very easy for the people around you to get comfortable.
How can you now communicate that with all the noise that's going on out there?
A lot of times the customer doesn't actually know what their problem is. In your rush and excitement to bring them an answer, you have a tendency to overlook that. Many CEOs don't want to be faced with uncertainty.
How can a person embrace this uncertainty?
Figure out everything that could go right and wrong. Let's pick a path and we'll adjust.
Mark, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
You know, all of us have these journeys, and I went back and I was kind of reviewing my notes, even with you, and I noticed that your journey kind of took you here and there and everywhere. So kind of share with the audience a little bit, how did you become now, president and CEO of CyberX?
Well, that's a heck of a journey. I wish I had a little more time. So I've spent 40 plus years in IT. A lot of us that reach the point of CEO, whether it's a large organization, your startup, right? Some are thrust into it,
Right.
And I actually had that happen to me during the COVID era, and I wasn't ready for it. So I had to sort of step back. I went back into the industry and spent a few more years doing what I do well. I've spent over 35 years in the cybersecurity industry, probably with three of the largest consulting firms in the world, Accenture, PwC, and most recently Wipro, which is an Indian-based firm. Working in those industries, you have to be sort of a situational leader. You have to learn to adjust to the size of the organization, the challenges you're going to be faced in. A lot of times you're thrown into those, whether they're government or large commercial companies, you just don't know what you're going to run into. And while my focus is cybersecurity, it can be anything. So my journey has been, I went from the Air Force, I went to General Motors in Michigan. I spent 20 years with Accenture all over the world with large companies dealing with all kinds of problems. I went to PricewaterhouseCoopers as their global chief architect for a while during that pandemic time. And then, like I said, the last 3 was with Wipro as their public sector lead, healthcare and public sector lead. And I finally made a choice to the point I'm at now where I felt like I needed to take control of what I wanted to do and what I saw a need in the industry, in multiple industries, for cybersecurity that just wasn't getting answered or wasn't getting answered to my satisfaction. So that's sort of the journey I've taken. I actually chose to do it this time versus the last time when I was sort of forced into it. And I know CEOs have been in both sides of that. Some have chosen to step into those roles. Some of them were groomed into those, and others were thrust into them.
Right. So right now, you saying you made a choice to kind of become CEO this time. Now, since you have become CEO, what's some of the challenges that you found yourself, so we can help other CEOs who kind of decide, even though they decide to do it, right? That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy journey.
Right.
Kind of share yours.
So whether you're thrust into it, right, and you're not prepared, or you've thought it through, or you feel like you've thought it through, there are some things that you have to sort of get right.
Okay.
It's at the CEO level, you have to have or be able to establish those relationships, right? Because it depends on your business. If you're a product business, you're going to live or die on that product, and not just on offering it, selling it, but maintaining it. And there's obviously a cost to maintain it. And then there's a shelf life for most products. So are you prepared to think through that shelf life and what comes next, right? Or are you just going to run that product as a brand until it's gone? In my case, I run a services business, right? Consulting, that's where a lot of my experiences come from. So in the service side of this, it's about relationship. It's about communication, surprisingly enough. And I'm an introvert.
Bespoke Human Potential Coaching sponsors this show. Bespoke helps CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs get rid of those blind spots that they've been carrying around since childhood. So if you're stuck and have some blocks, click the link below for your clarity call or scan the QR code if you're on video. Let's get rid of those blinds. Now back to the interview.
So communicating broadly and communicating and establishing the relationship and maintaining it, it's so important, but I'm not necessarily good at it. So I have to work at it every day,
right,
for that to happen. But in that services side, it's more about that trust, the communication, and delivering excellence. Right? And so we talked briefly about this sort of for most organizations, small or growing, you want to build with purpose. And what I mean by building with purpose is whether you're on the consulting side or product side or other, you have a tendency to drive value for yourself and for your employees. So first and foremost, am I solving for a symptom, or am I solving for something that the customer, whoever that customer is, really needs? Do you understand? Right? Because a lot of times you'll take a product and you'll bend it and twist it in ways that it wasn't really designed to do to help solve that problem. But are you really solving the right problem? And are you doing something with your product that's unnatural? If you're on the service side of that, am I, once again, sort of solving for a symptom that I've got this problem. Well, is that really the problem? Right? Or do we need to peel that a bit and get to what's really causing it? And sometimes it's a very simple answer, but that's what I mean by building with purpose. If I'm not solving their problem at the end of the day, their real problem,
right,
then what have I really done other than just drive some revenue for my organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And one of the challenges, I like what you mentioned there. Number one, you said like build with purpose, and part of that building with purpose is actually solving a true problem. And part of my coaching in my transformational program, what we talk about is, you coming with me with presenting issues, but that's not the problem. The greater problem is what we want to solve for, because if we solve for the greater problem, then there are no more presenting issues. But I guess the challenge is, so how would you go about doing that? Because one of the challenges now, I mean, I don't know about you, Mark, but it's one of the challenges that how can you now communicate that with all the noise that's going on out there,
Yeah. So it gets a little bit back to that communication channel, right?
Right.
You have to be willing to offer up your time to talk, right, and build that trust up. A lot of times customer doesn't actually know what their problem is at the root. Back to the noise issue, right? And in your rush and excitement to bring them an answer, you have a tendency to overlook that. So that communication, once again, is important. It's actually talking to those customers. I find myself every day just carving off time to go, call me, talk.
Right.
I'm here. Let's spend 15 minutes making sure that you even understand what the problem may be, right? And I'll give you an example. I did this with a very large automotive executive yesterday. Okay, I won't give the name, but let's say they're a luxury brand in airports. Okay, and that luxury brand does both commercial sales in that brand, and they also do government and defense work, right?
Right.
And back to where my company sort of fits, we've talked about this. I sort of sit in the middle between those two, and so the discussion I went in with was I have a very interesting novel product, right? That I wanted them to know about. I was excited to know about, thought it would solve some problems for, and it will.
Right. Bespoke Human Potential Coaching sponsors this show. Bespoke helps CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs get rid of those blind spots that they've been carrying around since childhood. So if you're stuck and have some blocks, click the link below for your clarity call or scan the QR code if you're on video. Let's get rid of those blind spots. Now back to the interview.
But ultimately, after we had the product discussion, we put it aside and got frank and sort of reality based on the discussion. Let's go back. Mark, do you really know what's going on in my business today? Right? Let me tell you, right? Let's not answer, let's not solve today. Let's go back to square one. Once we did that, there were 3 or 4 things. And as we started through 3 or 4 things, it's like, okay, well, 2 of these 4 things you can't solve yourself. You're going to need others in your organization for you to be successful at solving those. So let's take the ones you can control and solve. But now it got to, as part of this Build with Purpose, it got back to, you've got to sort of partner either internally or externally to grow and to address that and grow it. Right? This is part of that building with purpose. And then you ultimately need a team to solve. So what I get by this is most customers have established their base around them, their fiefdom, their kingdoms, whatever terms you want to use. Right? And they did it to maintain or to create a defensible position for themselves and their people. Okay. Reduce risk. Right? You're going to have a real challenge, whether you're a startup company or you're a scaling company or you're a growth, you're in that growth mode, right? If you don't build with purpose, if you don't think through more than just the execution, and you don't figure out how best to team, goes back to the communication. You've got to constantly look for who you're teaming with. Right? There'll be some you team with regularly because they've helped you solve problems in the past, but they may not be the ones to solve problems for you in the future. Right? So you always have to be open to that sort of teaming and partner model. Don't get too comfortable with that. And then the last one is that sort of teaming to solve. So it's very easy for the people around you and the people supporting you and the people that you even interact with in an organization to get comfortable and not want to take personal risk or even organizational risk, right? So you have to go outside. You have to find sometimes that partner to team with who will make you stretch and risk a little bit, right? So that's what I mean by sort of teaming to solve.
Wow. I mean, that's powerful, because I think one of the other points that you talked about before is kind of being willing to embrace uncertainty. I mean, you're willing to solve, right? You got this challenge. We have these tenants. We have these presenting issues. And I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, which is important that people have to understand, when you first were talking with the CEO yesterday, you were saying that you came in with a certain mindset, but it's kind of step back. And I think it's like in the 7 Habits, it says, seek first to understand, then be understood. Until you truly understood what he really needed and allow him to communicate that, that's when the conversation really started to move. So you got to build with purpose. Now, talk a little bit about how can a person now grow or embrace this uncertainty that we all going to experience one way or the other.
Right. So many organizations want to manage the envelope of risk, right? They have a risk appetite. They got to report to the board, right? The board's, going to govern for that risk overall. The CEO may or may not be a risk taker. Depends, right? There's so many types of CEOs out there. I mean, you look at somebody like Tim Cook, right? In Apple. He's essentially a servant of his people, He's
Okay.
one of those ones when you look at your employee base and you look at what they're doing and you look at the customers, they're always happy because he's a servant of the people. But if you look at somebody like Jeff Bezos, right, and Amazon, that
Right.
he's an entirely different type of CEO, right?
Right.
He's a visionary type of person. He's this sort of North Star that we're going to try something way the hell out here that
Right.
nobody thinks will work. And we're
Right.
going to accept the risk. We're going to pivot quickly. We know we're going to fail, but we're going to go do these things. And you just watch
Right.
Amazon and you see that play out, right? I look at my organization and what I'm trying to do, and I view myself as a transformational CEO. So
Okay.
what that means for me is because of cybersecurity, just because of the challenges, because of the constant threats and the different industries, right, that I can cross, I have to constantly challenge myself
Okay.
to learn something new every day and bring that thought to my customers, right? Back to the discussion we had, about the automotive one yesterday, right? I started with a mindset. I started with something new. I started with something that I felt was going to solve a problem. And I said,
Right.
okay, great. That's wonderful, Mark. And it may very well do it. Let's put that aside and let's go back to the foundational, right? Back to the
Right.
goal with purpose. So embracing the uncertainty, many CEOs that I interact with, and even their frontline personnel, right, their C-level staff, a lot of them don't want to be faced with uncertainty, right? The data crunchers want the data, right?
Right.
They come out of the scientific side of this. Give me the data and let me validate it myself. Let me run it against my model, right?
Right.
Before I agree with you. Then you have the sort of engineers mindset on that side of that who go, let's just collaborate. Let's just talk. Let's theoretically throw things up on the wall and see what sticks, right? So I sort of sit in that middle,
Mhm.
and embracing uncertainty means you got to do something. You got to do some things. You got to take
Okay.
what I call calculated risks, right?
Okay.
So you can't just sit on that one side of the fence and go, just keep giving me the data until I'm completely comfortable with what the outcome's going to be, which you look at somebody like healthcare, that's usually, they're way over. They never want to take that calculated risk because somebody might die, right?
Right.
But, but you look at them now, the adoption of AI in their space is a calculated risk,
Right.
right? Right? You get over on the other side of that equation and they go, we'll take all kinds of risks.
Right.
We'll start 5 things knowing 4 of them will fail, right? But there's a cost associated with doing that and having no data, right? And just
Right.
chasing it. So I'm sort of sitting in the middle from a cybersecurity perspective. And if you look at the introduction of AI and what comes with that, that's embracing that uncertainty. I know there's going to be challenges. I know data. I'm watching what's going on. I know the data is going to be used against AI models, and it's going to cause threats. It's going to cause vulnerabilities
Right.
that in some companies, if they're not large enough to face it, it's going to cause complete catastrophic failure of that company.
Wow.
Okay? In others, the large company, they have the deeper pockets. They may be able to shut down that problem. They may be able to close down that effort, and they're going to be able to write it off on their balance sheet. But they're still going to take the hit, but they're going to try it. So I'm sitting in that middle, going, let's embrace that uncertainty. We know it's going to come, but let's do our best to figure out and what we used to call in the consulting a crystal ball. That method. Let's sit in a room and think about everything that could go right and everything that could go wrong, right, within a reasonable sphere. And then let's pick a direction. Let's pick a path, and we'll adjust. That's to me what is that embracing uncertainty.
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at the entire picture and seeing and calculating, okay, which path that I can go
Yeah.
to get the desired result, meaning like I'm
Right.
willing to take the risk. I'm willing to expect the setbacks. I'm willing to be flexible in my approach. So as I continue to move forward, I'm still moving forward. You
Right.
know, and one of the things I talk about is having inspired action, meaning like not is these are actions that when you are intuitively know and feel and sense that are right. But what you're talking about even deeper is that I'm getting all the data, and now I can look at the risk and knowing that there's a possibility this may not work, and I still know I have the resources or the know-how to be flexible enough to continue to move forward, right?
And I go back to that communication thread through this discussion. As a CEO, I don't need a PowerPoint. I don't need a report from my employees.
Right.
Let's get on a call. Let's talk about the observations. Let's talk about what seems to be going right or what seems to be going wrong. And let's just either move on, let's continue on that path, or let's make an adjustment, right? But I don't need hours of meetings to get those. And sometimes the person that's got the answer is not the CTO, CIO, CFO. It's 2 levels down below them, and
Right.
it's the poor person that's the frontline manager who's working. It's the CEO, small, medium, large company. Call that person in on the floor and have that frank discussion. Hey, I know you're a part of this. I know this is important to both you and what we're doing. Tell me what's going on. Don't status me.
Right.
Tell me what's going on. There's a difference between give me status and give me what's happening.
You know, I mean, but sometimes, I mean, if you have not built that level of communication with the subordinates, it's sometimes difficult for them to kind of really share with you the truth, right? And I think that's part of being a transformational
that's that ground
leader.
truth that the CEO has to have.
Right.
Right.
So I think, like you said before, continue to working through the thread of having a great communication is that they have to know that it's safe for me they have to know that it's safe for me to communicate with you what I really think, you know?
Right. And that's all those levels. So when I talk to my partners, when I talk to my to those C-level executives, it's you're not at risk. This is a safe place. What is not safe is when I find out later that you knew the ground truth and for whatever personal brands, protecting somebody, worried that you're going to lose your job, don't tell me, right? I'd much rather have you tell me, but good or bad as a CEO, I gotta make the call, right? So I just do that, but that's back to that sort of embracing uncertainty. I know there's going to be uncertainty. I know there's going to be some risk taking. It just has to happen.
And I think too, we talked a little bit about is being a people person.
Yeah.
You know, I think you're saying like the whole ideal of this is if we're building, we building our company on the backs of other individuals. So you have to have that type of situation. So kind of share with the audience a little bit about that, how you interact with those people.
Right. So that's what we were talking about, creating that pathway for the employees, right? And so I look at it this way: whether I'm hiring somebody and I'm doing the interview, or somebody HR supporting me is doing that interview, right? I'll say there are people. Most people are good enough.
Right.
Give them the chance. Give them the skills. This is where I'll still get up on my soapbox for just a brief moment. Whether you're a startup company or you're a well-established company, we have a tendency these days to, one, look for the perfect person, right? That purple unicorn. Or two, we have a tendency to look for those people that are an easy answer because we don't we don't train folks anymore. We don't guide folks anymore. It's easier to pilfer from my partners, right? Or my competitors. It's easier to put that responsibility to train and mentor, right, to a certain point on somebody else. But if you want my experience over 40 years of this,
right.
if you want good people and you want them loyal to your organization and you want them to feel like they can step out and learn and take a risk, right, without getting their knees cut out from them,
Right.
then you have to create that pathway. And that's what I mean. You gotta have your own training program. It has a tendency, unfortunately, to get cut when things aren't going well in an organization. But training internally, that organic growth, that organic mentoring is paramount to building a good company. Like I said, I spent 20 years with Accenture. At points in my career, I was responsible for hundreds and hundreds of experts right underneath me. And I couldn't manage them individually. But what I could do was make sure that those individuals knew what was important to learn. They knew how to share that story to their individuals, right? And whether it was technical people had to learn stuff about finance people had to learn about business process, right? Whatever that happens to be, it's a lifelong sort of model. And I'd say if you're an organization, your startup, think through that training and that path for that employee now as part of what you're going to do, whether you're building a product or you're creating a service model or how you're doing that, or you're going to be a collaboration of a network consortium of partners and companies, right? Still, because you have to know for each partner, how do they manage their people? How do they train them? How do they get them, right? And if that doesn't agree with how you think you're going to work with them, that's going to be a challenge, right? If you're a big organization, Accenture's part of its strength was constantly putting each level of individual through different training, analyst, consultant, manager, senior manager, partner, right? You grew that training internally. Yes, you learned a lot of stuff working with your customers. You learned a lot of stuff working with partners, but that was that pathway that they built. So I felt like the foundation of that, I got in the military and then continue to have that in General Motors and Accenture, right? And I would say it worked well. You can look at those companies, you can look at those organizations, and they're all faring well. Well, that's because they build that pathway for employees and that organic growth inside.
So why don't you go ahead and share with them, Mark, how people can actually get in touch with you, and how can you actually share with them, or how can they actually reach you, Mark?
Yeah. So, one, I have a website, Strategic Security, right? It's spelled with an X, but it's meant to be the plural of strategy. So it's strategicsecurity.com. We're out there as advisory consulting. Both we sit in a niche between large commercial companies and U.S. public sector, federal, civilian, and defense. And so having the experience on both sides of that, you can come to us either way. If you're a large commercial company or even a mid-sized commercial company who wants to aspire to be a large company, and you're either on government contracts or you intend to be on government contracts or you want a strategy for that, reach out to us at our website. You can also reach us we have a LinkedIn business page, Strategic Security. And actually, it's a very interesting. I've been doing an article set. We've got 14 of the 15 articles in the last article set are out there. So you can look through any of those, see if they're of interest. But you can reach us that way, right? Or you can come to my LinkedIn business page directly, Mark Savage, and I'm happy to take that call if it makes sense, and support. I have 5 or 6 business partners that help make up my organization as a structure. We do, like I said, all things cybersecurity, soup to nuts, but our focus area is this helping these large and mid-sized companies that want to sell their products and services to the government.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. So let's kind of wrap it up a little bit more. Kind of what would you like to leave with the audience today? I know you talked about a lot. You talked about building with purpose. You talked about embracing the risk and the uncertainty and how to build yourself and people. And I think we didn't get to power of collaboration or recognition and contribution. Right. So what would you like to leave with the audience today, Mark?
Yeah. So I think I've stated a number of times how important that collaboration, whether it's with your partners or your employees, needs to be. So that's power and collaboration. And then I'll just say, I'd like to leave everybody with a reminder as a CEO, how important your recognition of contribution to folks is. Whether it's a partner, right? And we have a tendency to point out our partners, the greatest one this year, right? Blah, 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 blah. But don't forget, as a CEO, that recognition, not only to your first line, but just how important it is for your employees internally, or even to your customers. How well that relationship and support that customer, you value that relationship, not just on the revenue numbers and that growth, but you really value what they do for the rest of us, for the global citizen, for the U.S. citizen. You're at the end of the day, you're making them successful, right? And you trust in what they're doing. So give them that recognition. That's the way I would leave. That would be my leaving jab.
Well, Mark, first and foremost, we'd like to thank you for being a part of the show today, man. You gave us a lot of great information and a lot of things to think about. And we also like to thank the listeners for kind of staying involved and staying tuned to what you share with us today, guys. Remember that true success comes when you embrace the legit mindset. So I want you to kind of keep learning, growing, expanding, and transforming every day. If this episode resonates with you and you're ready to break through those blind spots that's been holding you back, and those things are now showing up in your adult life right now, use the link below and schedule your free clarity call with me today. And let's unlock your full potential together. My name is Curtis McCullom. Make it a great day. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the show.
Thank you, Curtis.